Hello. Hopefully you can see me. I just now realized that I can't see you, so you're going to watch me try to load a web page for a minute. If you can see me, because I totally forgot that part of this process is logging on to Twitch so I can see the chat. Almost there, sorry. Let's see if I can. No, that was not what I wanted to do. Sorry. I want to pause the download so it's not stealing any of my bandwidth. Because hopefully we will have fewer problems than last week. Can anyone see me? I don't see anyone out there. Not even Quindy. How is this possible? There's Quindy. All right, now I feel better. Okay, so, oh, and there's Bob and Julie. Hi. With the dragon wings, yay. And Kirst is here. So I may look a little different. Santa bought me some equipment to try to help improve things a little. So we'll see whether that works or not. And I don't think even Santa can do much about my Twitch stream connection when that goes completely. So I hope you're all, we've all survived the first few days. What are we on? The first 2.5 days of 2022. Does time pass anymore? I don't know. I had trouble deciding what to do today. So I was thinking about some stuff. I was thinking about the shelf of shame idea. Maybe I'll still do that another week. I'll talk to you guys about that later in the stream. Kirst eventually remembered to pay the rent. Well, that's good. I was going to say I should remind everyone, make sure you put 2022 on your checks, but then who writes checks anymore? So is that relevant? No. Maybe Kirst did for his rent. I don't know. There's probably a different way to pay rent now. So yes, it's a new year, but I'm just as scattered and weird as I ever were. Kirst writes checks, and he spells it the right way. So what I've decided to do is go back to Elanter here, the Lost Prince. This building is old school. That's true. Probably a lot of landlords are still like, I am not in the modern era. So I will switch over. I have a new way to switch over. Oh, I just pressed a button and there it is. Although it looks a little sideways for some reason. Let's see, is everything straight? Yes. All right. Probably just need to zoom in more. So I was trying to check the exposure before I started, but if you feel like things look a little too dark, let me know. So this is Elanter, the Lost Prince. If you were here last year, you may remember him. I was actually, you know what? I'm just going to scooch this just a little to get dizzy. To make more room for the pot. He was the figure that I painted when I was talking about how to steal color schemes. So I started with this flyer that I had received. I like the variation of colors and values in these pillows. And I talked about how to match things. So I don't know what numbers these are. Because actually I think the numbering on YouTube is inaccurate. I don't know if that's something you can fix maybe. But. So I printed it out because when you're trying to match colors, trying to match against a screen is a fool's errand. And I actually printed out 2 different versions because I had, so the top line and the bottom line are different versions. Because from the picture I took on my phone versus scanning it out. And then I was matching colors to it. And then we started to paint on him, but then the holidays happened, so I started focusing on holiday things. Which admittedly, depending on how you celebrate, the holidays are still ongoing for you. Because I think, so some Christian faiths celebrate Epiphany on January 6th, and then Orthodox Christians didn't agree with the calendar changes and celebrate Christmas on January 7th. That's kind of, I thought I'd talk about New Year's and New Year's resolutions a little bit while I'm trying to paint, if that works, because, talking and painting is not always my strong suit. But I will try. Because pretty much all your favorite channels and magazines and whatever are doing one of two things, if not both. So they're talking about resolutions and how to make the best resolutions and be a better you and all that kind of stuff. There's always a lot of pressure of that on the new year. And then so I'm just wiping off my palette paper because you don't want to have excess water on there. It was a fresh piece. So you can use a paper towel for that. I just have my damp sponge. So I do think resolutions are, you know, the basic idea of resolutions isn't a bad thing. Trying to improve ourselves and make our lives better and accomplish more of our goals. Those are all positive things. But, I mean, the main thing, important thing I think is January doesn't have the lock on doing that. Mondays don't have the lock on doing that. I couldn't find it in a quick look, but I remember reading something about a study that found people who quit smoking who just decided very spontaneously to do it were sometimes more successful than people who made like a whole long plan and picked a day and tapered down and all this stuff. And that is exactly how I quit smoking many years ago. I had a cold. It was like December, and I'm like, I just don't want to have to go outside on the porch to smoke, so let's give this a shot. And I have managed to not smoke since then. And I think most of my other major life decisions have been fairly similar in that I've made decisions to improve myself or whatever, but I can't think of one that I made specifically on January 1st that was like the most successful one. All right, so in my ideal world, what I would start doing is just working on this rust-colored over robe. I don't know the names of medieval male clothing very well. But what I was realizing just before the show started is that this scabbard and the pommel and all that are pretty inset, and the chance of me being able to paint here without getting paint on here is limited. So I'm mentioning this partly because that is surprisingly, or I guess it was surprising to me, one of the questions I get most often is what order to paint things. I feel like it's looking a little dark. I'm gonna put that up a little more. And I'm also gonna, don't look. Close your eyes. You do that. Because I think I wasn't holding him. I don't know. I feel like I've forgotten how to do this since, you know, all the way since last year because it was so long ago. You know, last week. So I'm going to work on, but I don't want to work on all the leather because for other things, you know, if I'm painting here, I'd probably get on there. Now, it depends on how precise you are and how much time you want to take. I like worrying about getting these bigger areas the way I want them because these smaller areas are usually easier to paint. They don't take as many layers. They don't take as much time. So if I have to break this into 2 stages, this is not the end of my world. But I know some people would rather paint all the things that are the same color at the same time. So yes, that is black and brown. But so every year I try to talk about kind of, I don't know, resolutions, improvement, making your hobby life easier, stuff like that. I do like kind of a New Year's or close to New Year's post on my blog. And this year I don't know. I kind of didn't know what to say. Like I felt like I could just repost last year's and it would be just as accurate. So I guess I thought kind of I would, sorry, I'm trying to decide how I want to highlight that up. If I want to have some red in there or not. And I think I want to have a little red in it. Maybe it stands out by not being saturated. So I just kind of did a greatest hits post where it's like, okay, if you don't feel up to dealing with life and making resolutions, here's my post from last year, which was about if your life is complicated right now and you've got a lot of pressures and you're dealing with being sick or taking care of people or not being able to work or working too much or whatever thing is happening in this wonderful new world, stop a minute and ask yourself if you're making yourself feel guilty about not doing enough hobby stuff. And if you aren't doing enough hobby stuff because you can't, because you're too tired or you don't have the space or the energy or other things are taking your demands, that is okay. Like, give yourself permission to be okay with that, and don't be another problem in your life. Like, get out of your own way and just let it go for now. But if you are excited about doing hobby things and trying to deal with, you know, maybe not having as much space as you'd like, or not having as much time as you like, I have another post that New Year's post links to, with suggestions for that. And then if you do want to make resolutions, which, as I said, I do think are a good thing, but I think it's important to make them about the thing you control, which is your own behavior. So by that I mean, saying I'm going to paint 3 miniatures a week is a not great resolution. But if you say I want to paint 3 times a week, that is a better resolution. So why would I say, you know, I want to paint 3 miniatures? Why is that not as good a resolution? We'll say you want to work on a competition piece. You want to go in the Reaper Quarterly contest that I think is starting up again soon. Or you want to paint something for ReaperCon, or you want to paint something as a gift for somebody. If you're making your improvement metric or your resolution metric about quantity, then you're not fulfilling your goal if you're trying for quality. So if you instead make it about amount of time that you spend doing something, you have the flexibility of doing what you want at those times, of changing the way you're working or what you're working on. So you can decide to work on a skill, or try to, you know, speed paint 10 minis in a week for the game next week, or paint a really great gift for a friend. Like, you have the option to do all of those things if you're setting up the pass-fail metric on what you did, or the time you spent, more than what you produced in terms of what you did. So I don't know if that makes sense. The equivalent one would be if you're trying to do fitness things, you're trying to lose weight or gain a certain amount of strength or whatever, you have to make that about how much effort you put in. Like, are you following the food plan you want to follow? Are you following the exercise routine you want to follow? And then if you only lose like 8 pounds instead of 15, you're not a bad person. You didn't fail. It just, you know, it didn't work out exactly the way you wanted. But if you do the thing, if you make it about the thing you control, then you didn't fail. If you make it about the result, then you can fail even though you did everything right, I think is more what I'm trying to say. And then you just feel like, well, what's the point of doing everything that I said I wanted to do if it doesn't work? So hopefully that kind of makes sense. And actually, I've just realized that if you go to my blog, you will not see that post first, because last night I ended up... so since I already had the blog and stuff, when I started watching the Wheel of Time shows, and I have friends asking me for my opinion for various reasons, because my big hobby prior to painting miniatures was kind of related to the Wheel of Time, so which some of them were aware of. So they were curious about my opinions. So I just kind of co-opted the space to talk about that, and I put one up last night. Am I staying in frame? So that is the first thing, but if you scroll down, then you're going to get to the New Year's thing. And if you scroll down some more, you will get to me finally posting the pictures from the first dry brush test. So what happened is I was kind of hoping that... See, and I totally did get paint right there. So that's good. I can fix that up before I paint his... Hey, Clever Crow. Michael's here with us. So that is why, even though I don't want to paint all of the leather right now, I went ahead and painted that leather. But that also suggests that I should go ahead and paint the the metallics on this part right now. Let's give it a darker base coat though. A darker and apparently watery base coat. So yeah, back before I moved to America and started painting miniatures, I used to run a game that was based on the Wheel of Time. And as part of that, I went through the books and I wrote down, well, the books. I went through the first 7 or 8 books. I gave up after a while because I moved to America and got married and started painting miniatures. And made notes on all of the kind of cultural and organizational details. So stuff about the dress of a given country, or, you know, how, you know, what their government was, what this organization has its structure or uniform or whatever like that. For the purpose of people on the game to be able to reference for making characters and stuff like that. So if you're familiar with muds and mushes, this is what this was. It was a mush. And since there were a lot of people reading the books who I thought might find useful, I wrote it up in such a way that it was just a general resource on the web. This was way back in the day, so this is like plain text. Very bare bones. It's called the Wheel of Time Concordance, and it is still out there. And about halfway through writing my notes on the show, I realized that I could reference myself for determining accuracy on some of these things. Why is that dark? Okay, I guess I get it. So anyway, I've been writing my as I watch it notes on the TV show and posting them on my blog, since I didn't want to start like a whole new thing just for that. I can barely keep track of the things I'm doing right now. I mean, sites and whatnot, accounts, all that kind of good stuff. So if you are into the Wheel of Time at all, you've been watching those shows, you could read those if you want to. But I have no expectation that anyone's actually reading those. I just put them up so that when I do have friends ask my opinion, I can send them there quick and easy. Michael says, wow, you have always liked writing. Words, writing. Yeah, no, Muds and Mushes are games that are all words. There are no graphics. It's all words. It's all theater of the mind, as they say. And I wrote a lot of words running that game. Which, on the offhand chance that anyone out there listening knows that world at all, there are multiple, I think there are still some Wheel of Time themed games, and there were multiple ones even back in the day. Not a ton, but there are multiple. We did kind of unofficially have Jordan's permission. We tried to get official permission, but 2 of us talked to him in person, and he knew who we were. He just never, sent a letter back saying, sure, fine, have fun. He called us the mushy people. But the one I ran was Tales of Tabarin. Tabirin, I'm not sure how they're saying it in the show. That's always the funny thing about when they make a show of something that you've been reading a long time, and you say things in your head one way, and then you discover that someone is saying them a different way. I mean, I kind of already had that experience because I spent the last few years listening to all of the audiobooks, and there were a few things I'd be like, who are you talking about? I'm like, oh, okay, that's how you say that. And then when it got to the later books that I had never actually read, because ironically, even though I met my husband through this game, I really did spend a lot of time and energy on it, but at a certain point I was like, I cannot reread these books every time he makes a new one. I'm an old person. I don't have that much time in my life. So I'm just going to wait for it to finish. And then it did finish, and then I still didn't manage to get around to it. But a few years ago I started doing that. And I finished early last year, I think. We're going to give that a second to dry. Working on, I have the fletching. I feel like my light isn't great. I don't know why. But when I got to the later books, then sometimes they would mention people, and I might want to look up something. There were a couple times where I felt like I wasn't sure if they skipped something in the audiobooks are usually pretty good, but it's just like a regular book where you can get a mistake where they, you know, transposed pages or left pages out or whatever. And there were a couple times, and I was like, what happened? Did they just skip something? I had no idea what they're talking about. So I was trying to look stuff up on the web, but then I had only information on how they had said the name and not how the name was written. So sometimes it was a little challenging to do web searches. But anyway, if you look past that, there's my great, there's another year, I have no idea how to address this. Which I guess is partly because, as I was saying, I kind of all the holidays, New Year's has always felt kind of like the most fake to me. Not like Hallmark card fake, but just it's not tied to like a solar or lunar phenomenon. It's a completely made up date. Other cultures have different calendars with different made up dates that in some cases are based on lunar and solar phenomena. I did learn the other day that January 1st used to be when the consuls in Rome were inducted, and that's pretty relevant to my life currently. I definitely want to observe that. So that's why, I mean, I think it's good to try to do improvement and all that stuff, but I don't think you have to link it to New Year's to have it succeed. Since the fletching is kind of back there, I figured I would also work on that right now, and it gives me something to do while the metallics are drying. Well, I can see the metallics are going to need another coat. For those who weren't here previously, I did include the metallics as part of that little color scheme thing that I was looking at. So I could have done it non-metallic metal, but I found pieces of 8, which was probably from last, like 2020 Reapercon, not 2021 Reapercon. It kind of had that little purpley gray thing that was going on in the pillow in the photo, so I thought that would be fun to do instead of non-metallic metal. Kirsty accepts any excuse to party up. All right, you party in honor of those consoles. But actually, that is a question I would ask all of you guys. What are some of the most interesting things that you have done on New Year's Eve? Because I actually, back in the day, I did used to do interesting things. And I don't just mean, you know, go get insanely drunk. I'm not saying that never happened. But I managed to do a few kind of unusual things on New Year's. So that was kind of thing. My thing for a while was doing weird stuff for New Year's. So I would love to hear, or outrageous party antics, or anything else. Any other interesting New Year's Eve or New Year's Day stories that you may have. Then I will share my weird things that I did on New Year's. So in lieu of going and getting stuff, other paints, I mean, I am just going to use blue liner to shape this. Well, that doesn't entirely fit the purplish thing. Let me see if I mix just a little bit of this in. You know, with having 0 reds, let's see if I can use a bit of brown and evoke the spirit of purple. That. So far, I don't see any New Year's stories. So you guys have all had such crazy antics that you are not willing to admit them on stream. Is that what I'm to deduce from this? I will share mine, and then we'll see if you guys feel like doing it. So there were a couple years back when I was young and partying. See, focus. Where there was like some bowling alley that would get a band and have really cheap drinks and do New Year's. And that was actually surprisingly fun. Although I don't necessarily recommend getting drunk and bowling while you have whiplash, because then you forget to be as cautious of your whiplash as perhaps you should be. Because I think that year we were coming back from some family Christmas party and we were stuck in traffic and somebody rear-ended my parents' van. Which it actually wouldn't have been too bad, other than the back seats didn't go like all the way up to your neck. So there was just, when I went back and forward, there was just nothing to go back onto. It was these weird, I don't know, they were like dining room, dinette chairs or something in a trailer or something. But, so I was on good drugs and drinking a little and bowling. And that was perhaps not the most felicitous combo. I'm not saying this is why I have neck problems today, because crouching over painting miniatures probably has more to do with that. But I'm also not saying that it didn't have some lasting effect, because I suspect that it did. Not the bowling part, to having whiplash. And then one year we went to see the stage play Dracula on New Year's Eve, which I thought was kind of fun. I had this friend who was like very fun and kind of, she would find different exciting things to do, and I think both years it was her planning that led to these things. Then there was the year we tried to go somewhere, and I'm still very young in this scenario, and in Canada. So I lived in Canada then, not here, and I'm wearing this I had this mini skirt jacket thing that I'm sure looked very nice in 1986, but probably would not look very nice now. It was all flowery and purple. And just like light little girl shoes. And we tried to get in one place and we couldn't. And then we're walking around trying to get in this place and that place. And it was just a lot of walking. And we ended up at one of the diviest dive bars. It's not the worst. It's not the worst dive bar I've ever been in. But it was one of the worst. So I definitely did not need to have dressed up and walked all that way for what ended up being our New Year's celebration. I think the worst, I don't even know if I'd call it a dive bar. It was kind of a Vietnamese restaurant that would get a band in the basement, and they would serve kids illegally, so I'm sure that's one of the reasons we went there. But the part that I remember with horror is I actually ordered food. I mean, this was not a place I should have ordered food, because the bathrooms were terrifying. And I've been in, ask Michael, I've been in a lot of bathrooms. If I tell you a bathroom is terrifying, it's probably pretty bad. I've gone in subway station bathrooms and other Chinese food restaurant bathrooms where you have to pass the Peking duck hanging on coat racks. Michael is asking what day is New Year's on Canada, and you say that. But, so when I first started dating Kevin, I came down here for a couple of weeks around July 4th. And we went out to some fireworks display that his brother's work was hosting or something. And we're there at the picnic, and, some coworker of his brother's comes up and they're talking to me, and they're like, oh, didn't Canadian New Year just happen? And I'm like, what? It's we're on the same calendar as you guys. What are you talking about? She had seen some kind of news footage about Canada Day, which is on July 1st. In a very similar celebration with just fireworks and getting drunk. But I was seriously, your northern neighbor, your biggest trading partner, and you literally think that we have a different calendar. Okay, that's great. That's not concerning at all. And yet still I moved here. So you are joking, I know, Michael, but not everybody is joking when they ask questions like that. All right, now I can do this rust-colored over robe. None of you are going to rescue me from knowing what the names for medieval male costume are. So I will just go on making them up. But yeah, as far as this year is concerned, I was kind of maybe if we don't look at the New Year too hard and put any pressure on it, it will perform better than the past two. I'm not making a big fuss at all. Clever Crow does not remember what he used to do on New Year's, so he parties very hard. And Quinny says, to be fair, I don't think that Newfoundland is actually on the same calendar with anyone. Well, they're not in the same time zone. So they actually have the half-hour time zone. So when you would watch Canadian TV, it would be like, you know, so this airs at 7 p.m. Eastern, 6:30 Newfoundland time. So they really are on a half hour, which I don't think there is anywhere in America that is on a half hour. But they are just a little bit to the side, off. I don't know how you want to put it, of maybe the average Canadian. I don't think that's unfair to say. Now, is that the color that I was painting? See, I don't think that it is. I don't know. This poor guy may never get finished because I don't know what I'm doing to him. Because I bet I had a shadow color on there. Yes, it very much looks like I had a shadow color on there, which I will assume is this. Although that does not make sense. See, I wasn't sure that I had all of the paint colors that I picked out. And then I was looking at the videos and I seemed to not have shown you guys very well in the video which paints I was using. And I'm continuing to do that. So let me rewind a moment and let's see what we have here. So the dark color that was painted on the leather is, where did that go? I just had that one. Black and brown, and then I did some shading with blue liner, and I highlighted up with a bit of Shawanti Sienna, which is Pathfinder color. So black and brown, Shawanti Sienna, and then I just mixed additional highlights with these that are really for his hair, but they're light colors, and it'll make everything kind of gel together better. And then the fletching was a lighter version of Ancient Oak, which is a cloak with the Medusa green. That is also a Pathfinder color. I picked a number of Pathfinder colors for this one. And then just a little bit of amber gold for the highlights. So I didn't want the, I like the idea of having some more green near his face, and I wanted it to be lighter, but I didn't want it to be too saturated and drawing attention, because one of the things that I've been trying to work on lately, not in a like resolution sort of way, but maybe, I don't know, is improving my focus. So keeping the idea that this is sort of, he's on a stage and this is where the spotlight is, and this is where I should be using light and color to draw your attention first and foremost, and then you kind of wander around and hopefully come back to that, because I'm very bad at that, historically speaking. So, oh, thank you, Robin Boy Wonder, for subscribing. Wow, 25 months, that's impressive. We appreciate your support. I'm going to guess that I use some chestnut brown with that. Well, I think that's too dark. No, it's not. Nope, it is chestnut brown. So there we go. The starting color for the overrobe is chestnut brown. First I have to fix where I got paint, because as I expected, this was going to be a hard place to reach. Then I will start painting his robe. Probably I do want to add, I mean, I want that fairly light compared, I want it to be lighter compared to the cloak, but I still feel like maybe I need a little bit of shadow there. So I'm going to use the black and brown for that, the same color that was the starting point for the leather. And I guess it's a weird time of year to be doing this, but kind of my idea with this was, this color scheme was an alternate kind of fall color scheme that wasn't just, you know, all rusty reds and oranges and faded yellows and stuff. So to me, that set of pillows, part of what I liked about it was that it kind of still had a fall vibe without being the typical stereotypical fall colors, if that makes sense. And I'm going to be fairly rough with this to start. I wouldn't always do that in the real world, but I do sometimes, because I think one of the problems people have with you get into blending and you're worried about the blending, and it distracts you from thinking about where you're putting the colors and what you're trying to do by putting the colors there. So they're meant to be shadows and highlights. They're meant to add, make the form, the shapes, 3D shapes or forms, look more three-dimensional. And thinking about where you put them helps accomplish that. Like this arm, even though it's crooked, I mean, we'll see it more on this arm. This is a cylinder, just like my paintbrush. And just like my paintbrush, depending on how reflective the surface is, you'll get that line of highlight. So in terms of it being matte cloth, maybe this will, well, it won't work better because the way the lights are in the studio. But if you assume the light was coming from above, you kind of have a column of light here, then this would be sort of your midtone, and then it should shade down to shadow there, and that creates that sense of roundness. And even though the sculptor has, of course, very kindly made this round for us, because it doesn't have in scale lighting on it. Like if I put a little lamp over him, like he had a ceiling light over him, and I carried him around that way, it would add a lot of lighting and shadow based on the structures that the sculptor has done. But since I don't want to carry him around like that, I'm going to add them with paint. So thinking about that instead of thinking I want this to look like a super smooth cloak is something some of us need to do. Now, not everyone. Michael's fine at this. He doesn't need to think about this. He needs to go home and practice his blending. No, I'm kidding, Michael. But for me, I spent way too much time thinking about the blending and making it look pretty and smooth for many years, and not enough time thinking about where am I putting these, how dark should it go, how light should it be, all that kind of stuff. So sometimes, especially if I'm trying to push my contrast, I like to rough it in like this and then go back and do the steps of making it look pretty. And also, you don't have to go back. Like if I was painting this guy for a game tonight and he needs to look good on the table, I could leave that and not worry about that. But since I'm painting for you guys, he needs to look a little nice. So I will worry about the blending a little. So then I just kind of take a lighter mix and just sort of try to tease the edge until it's smoother, basically. There's probably a better way to explain that. I mean, this is one of those things that everybody calls something different, I think. Some people call it feathering. I find that more and more I am using kind of a stippling stroke. And I'm not going to aim for super fantastically amazing on this, because otherwise you would watch me paint this entire robe for the whole stream, and that's going to be pretty boring. At least I think it would be boring. I guess I could do one stream where I sit and paint it the real way that I do, and you can just see how agonizingly dull that is. Most of good blending is just patience, I think. Being willing to go over and back over and over again until it looks right. So this is actually going to be one of the trickiest ones, because that is actually not really a strongly sculpted fold, this right here. So these are more defined, which means that the shape of the figure there is working with the darker paint and the person's eyes to make them more likely to see it as smooth, whereas I've accented the degree of that fold. So there's some onus on me to make it look right. Which I don't have to. I could treat that as a shallower fold if I wanted. But this is kind of the genesis of, if you've ever heard the term paint plastic surgery, that's how you do it. You put a little more dark or light in places than the sculpt does to create the illusion that the sculpt is more of a particular way. Which can be done because you want to change something. It's not always done because, you know, you think the figure is in perfectly sculpted. But let's face it, we've all got, you know, some classic figures or some from kind of newer startup people that we like love the figure, but it may not be as professionally sculpted as something by, say, Bob and Julie would be. Now I'm going to do the same thing with the highlights. I don't know. It may be fine on the jump because I think this is like a slightly transparent color. But no, I think I am probably going to need to come back with the middle color and do some more smoothing. But that's okay. Alas, I think this brush has lost some of its spring, and I've been thinking about making an order for new ones. It's certainly not just the past couple of years, but I have noticed the price of sable brushes going up. Alas. But I like them too well not to paint with them. I don't recall if I cleaned up the sleeve at all, so let me double check. I am very bad about that, forgetting that there's some other part of a thing that has that same color, and then this is why I like having all my mixes out on my palette so that I can come back and go, oh wait, I didn't paint that arm. I still have my colors out so I can paint that arm. Because when I started, I used to kind of mix all my transitions on in one pool, and then when I found that missing part, you notice I say when, not if, I would have to do it all again. Alright, I am going to mix just a transition between the, so this was chestnut brown, was the starting color for his robe. And then I mixed in the black and brown for the shadows, and I'm using the Pathfinder color, Numeria Rust. Which I like this color a lot, actually. I used it on some snakes in a class I did for, I want to say, Virtual Expo. No, I think it was the one before that. No, so right, it was Virtual Expo instead of Virtual ReaperCon. I don't know. As I say, the time is blended together for me and no longer has any relevance. To be fair, that's not entirely like a COVID thing. That's never been great at keeping track of time. When I was learning French in school, I would get dinged for not being great at you know, dates and times and stuff. And it's like, well, I'm not great at this in English, so I'm not exactly sure what you're expecting here. So still no New Year's Eve stories. This leaves me with so many questions about what you all have been up to. You've created an air of mystery. Good job. I'm coming back in with this straight Numeria, not Numeria rust. Restate some of those highlights, which I would say is also part of the secret, the willingness to go back and forth a little more, which I did not have when I first started out. And I resented for some time. I don't know why, but I resented the idea that you had to do that. And I'm actually, once I got comfortable with it, once I did it a little, and it wasn't as terrible as I thought it would be, it's fine. I don't know why I resisted that. So if you think about whether you're something like that in your painting. Yeah, I feel like the shadows kind of took over a little bit. Here, I'm going to pull them back. I'm staying in frame, I hope. So far, no technical problems. But I also haven't tried to show you photos or anything. I don't know what happened to the photos last week, but my husband was looking at that a little before we started, and he that's going to be a longer fix, I think. He thinks I'm going to have to make them all the same size, which is then turns putting photos up into way more of a pain in the butt than just grabbing a few things and throwing them in a folder. So I'll probably only start doing it for things where I needed to demonstrate a point and whatnot. So I don't think I can show you even still. I was hoping I'd be able to show you the reference photos from last week for painting dark skin, if my connection was not kerflooey, which it does not seem to be. But now I think the photos are kerflooey. I might try it, we'll see what happens. But I do have a couple of photos to show you. Well, one you've seen many times, but I will also show you the live thing. But I'm going to finish this robe first. So I think that needs some highlights. And let's see, this faded khaki is a little bit yellowy. I'll go ahead and use that with the pumpkin orange. So that's faded khaki with the, oh, why do I have pumpkin orange? Oh, I have pumpkin orange to highlight this that I'm, yes, so I spaced out there. So we start with the Numeria Rust, and now I'm going to highlight with the pumpkin orange. Which I guess at the time I started doing this was a currently available color. Hopefully you got some. Dries a little darker than it looks wet, but it's still possible that I might have to work on some of these transitions. Try to be a little more precise now, which really I should all the time, but it is challenging for me to try to talk and paint for real, as it were. like this folded back part. I want to show that piece of cloth being kind of lifted up over the others. So this was another problem that I had when I was first starting out, is I would kind of do everything very evenly. So I would have made every one of these little folds, like the top part, I would go up to the same highlight on each of them, and then the bottom part, I would go as dark in shadow on each of them. And first of all, that doesn't reflect the reality. So you saw I almost went over here with my pumpkin orange, but I didn't, because if you look at it, if you kind of look at it side on, so these two folds are more raised up than this one in the middle. So they're going to be catching more light. And this little bit at the bottom is curling further out from the main mass of the body, so it's going to be getting a little more light. This part that's sticking up is going to be getting a little more light. This part that's sticking up is going to be getting a little more light, which means the other things are getting less light. So if I keep highlighting them up with all of my same highlighting mixes, I'm not going to create that effect that these two, these three are different and those ones are more inset, because everything will be too uniform. And it can be really hard not to do that for some reason. I think it's like as creators, we kind of have this innate push to make things symmetrical and even and similar. But as viewers, whether we're conscious of it or not, we like looking at difference and change and alteration. So it can be really hard not to just kind of go by rote, going, okay, well, it's the top of the fold, so it gets this color. It's the bottom of the fold, so it gets that color. And really thinking about, like, okay, when is the point where this isn't getting as much light and I need to stop highlighting? And doing that, even though it seems like, well, if you're making all of the crevices really dark and you're making all of the peaks really light, shouldn't that be more contrast? But weirdly, it's less. It's going to look more contrasted if you take a little time to have some differences like that. And then you're painting less, actually. So you're thinking more, but you're painting less. Now I'm going to go to my faded khaki, I think. Or I'm just going to mix in some of the same gold. Paint all of my fingers is what I'm really going to do. So I'm just pulling some of my pumpkin and adding a little bit of that amber gold. And I haven't been adding much water to this, other than, doing the shading on the metallics, because I wanted that more semi-transparent. But when I add stuff to make highlights, or I pick colors for highlights that have a decent amount of white in them, that is when I will often thin, or test and thin, because those are going to be pretty opaque and they're way more likely to go on and look like, you're going to see the lines, or they're going to look like too much or whatever. Which is not to say that if you do need to thin your paint more for the other stuff, that's a problem. I'm just saying, even if you don't thin a lot, you might need to thin with stuff that has a lot of white in it. Whites tend to be thick and opaque, or things with white tend to be thicker or more opaque. So since I didn't pick a more yellowy color, I picked kind of a creamy color. I knew going in that it was going to be more opaque. Well, and also, if you've been here for the swatching, I didn't have to know going in. I could look at my painted swatch and see, well, that covered up almost all that number underneath. So this is a pretty opaque paint, even just with one coat. Whereas if we get the pumpkin orange back, you can see pretty much the entire whatever code that is under there. Oh, that's part of the UPC code. You can see all of those numbers under there. So this is not a super opaque color. So I didn't really have to thin much or worry about the transitions as much where I was painting the pumpkin orange. And that's just pigment. That's not Reaper or anyone else being inconsistent in how they mix their paint, ripping you off. Or I hear so many weird theories when people are like, why are yellows and oranges and reds so transparent? These guys are ripping us off. And they are not. Artist paint is exactly the same thing. You can pretty much pick the color. Like, you can show me a color and I can tell you that that's likely to be more or less transparent. I'm not going to be 100% necessarily, but you would be surprised how close you can start guessing that. And even I think pigments have other properties, like where I was saying, you know, stuff with titanium white often feels thicker or it dries up quicker. And I think that's true. I think there are colors that dry faster than other colors. We don't notice it as much in acrylics because all our paint dries super fast. But if you do oil painting, there are paints that will dry within, you know, overnight or a few days. Well, so there are paints that will generally dry overnight, and see, I totally forgot that album. There are other paints that take days to dry. Well, and I am talking touch dry, because oil paint actually isn't dry for 6 months or something. Well, forever. I think oil paint keeps drying forever. I know a lot of people have been doing stuff with oil paints on miniatures, and I see all kinds of advice that I question whether it follows best painting practices in terms of longevity and stuff like that. But miniatures aren't the same as painting a picture that you're hoping the London Gallery is going to be having on the wall 200 years from now. Well, thank you, Trueborn Ateliers. I'm actually, yeah, that came up a little better than I expected. Now, does it look exactly like my picture? I don't think so. Well, it's not too far off from that pillow. But it works as a color scheme. A talus. Oh, I may or may not remember that, but I will try. And thank you for joining us today. So I think I'm going to push the highlights just a little bit on this part, since that's more the, you know, I was talking about like if there was a spotlight on this guy. He's in a stage play. There's a spotlight on him. Which I think is, if you're not worried about, like, okay, the light's coming from exactly here and here's what's happening. Instead of just a default light from above, which is kind of a good guideline for stuff. But if you combine that with this, there's a spotlight on this part of the figure. He's on stage. He's an important character. He's giving, like, a super important speech in the play. That's where you want people looking. Which, again, as I pointed out earlier, I am not the best at, and that is one of my things that I am trying to work on currently, is to get better with my color composition, or color and value composition, to create a more pronounced focal point on the miniature. And then the back's a little different, of course, because there isn't a face there. So you can kind of go another way and work on whatever you think is the most interesting part of the figure. Like if I decided to put a whole bunch of freehand on the back here, that would be fine. There's so little of it. The freehand would be showing here. It wouldn't be distracting from, you know, what I talked about with the focal point. So I could just go nuts and put whatever colorful, distracting, weird things I wanted to do here. This is probably not going to happen. Don't get excited, but it's probably not going to happen. And it would be fine from a focal point of view. If I was doing that instead on this skirt, you can see where that would be drawing a lot of attention away from his face, especially since I've already made it a pretty vibrant color. Right now it's the most vibrant color on the figure. His hair is going to get a lot lighter. So with his face and hair being lighter, that's going to help draw the attention back up here, we hope, especially since it's going to contrast with these darker green parts and the darker leather. Trueborn Atlas says, no worries, Trueborn is fine. I misspelling Atlas when I was younger and the name just stuck. Oh, okay. That's kind of... It's always fun to hear the origins for people's online names and identities and stuff. So have any of you made New Year's resolutions, or are you just kind of like me thinking, let's just let this year get off to an easy start, not put too much pressure on it, and hope that it will suck less than last year and the preceding year. All right, so that is his robe, I think, which I'm pretty happy with. When I finish the rest, I could end up deciding that maybe something needs to be a little darker or lighter. Trueborn Atlas is painting a mini a day for the rest of the year. Wow. Although I guess you came in a little later because I was talking about that. When you make a resolution like that, I would give yourself a little leeway that if you decide you want to paint something as a gift or something that's bigger or something for a contest that you can't finish in a day, make your metric you paint it every day so that you're still going to fulfill your goal, even if you end up with a situation where for your choice you can't finish something in a day, because that'll happen. And there was somebody, I actually got that idea from someone who read my blog, one of the New Year's posts from a few years ago, and he said he had done that. He'd been saying his thing was he had to paint a mini every day, and then he switched it to he had to paint every day, but he had the flexibility of working like on a skill or a long-term project or whatever, and he liked that. He felt he accomplished more with that than not. Hi, Rikers Iron and a party of 9 friends. Hi. And Lost Ted is here. Wow, thank you. That is a very kind thing that Lost Ted said. He said, I loved your art. Keeping inspiration for people like me, all the best. Sorry, I keep scrolling back. You're doing great. And Rikerson is joining us and says, your stream has been boarded by the crew of Rikers Iron. We come for your currency, entertainment, and take only lurkers to feed the Kraken. No, we treat our lurkers well here. We accept that our lurkers are allowed to just lurk and they don't have to say anything and feel pressure. But we are glad to have you here. Quindy has decided to wake up earlier to give myself a more relaxed morning instead of starting off my day in complete chaos. That sounds like a good change to make. I hope that works for you. I like a slow wake up myself. I am not a get out of bed and attack the day person, as I'm sure Michael would confirm, even at cons. I enjoy that we get to hang out with people and eat with friends and stuff, but if you see me in the morning and I just look dazed and maybe I look mean and like I ignored you, I am really just still attempting to boot up and I'm not in the real world yet. Oh, yeah, you can follow Rikers Iron over there's the Twitch channel. So take a look at that too. Lost Ted asks, do you ship worldwide? And I assume you are asking about Reaper, since this is the Reaper Miniatures channel, because I don't really ship anything. I mean, every once in a while I paint a miniature for a commission and I have to ship it, but I think you mean Reaper to buy their figures. So Reaper has, you can order from the US hub, and I think they do ship worldwide, but they also have a hub in the UK and they have a hub in Australia. So when you go on the reapermini.com website that I suspect Quindy has shared recently, it will ask you to pick your currency. And I think when you pick your currency, you're choosing which hub that you're buying from. I think. If that turns out not to be correct or you have more questions, I think you can mail help@reapermini.com and they will be able to answer any questions that you have. So I paint for them. I'm not actually a Reaper employee, so I'm like a contract worker, I guess is what you say. I do commission painting for them. So I don't know all the ins and outs of of the store and everything like that. I try to keep informed about what's in stock and what they're doing, and I've been to the factory and I know how they make the miniatures and stuff like that. So I can answer a bunch of questions, but I'm not like your most official source of information at Reaper. Another place to ask would be, so that the two shows that air that do have well-informed official Reaper employees are so 6 p.m. on Thursdays is Reaper Live, and they also give stuff away there, so that's a good show to hit. They give away gift certificates, sometimes stuff that they mail to people. And then I want to say 3 p.m. on Friday is, why am I blanking? Hold on, I have a cheat sheet. Reaper Land. And that, so one of the owners of Reaper and one of the employees do community type stuff there, but they're also available to answer questions. And sometimes employees are here. So sometimes Reaper John is here in chat on some of the various shows. I don't think he is here today, or he would be jumping up to answer this question in chat already. Riker's Iron just finished a bunch of Reaper minis over the holidays. And sorry, you guys are chatty today, so I'm having to scroll. To use for Frostgrave. Today was Monster Apocalypse and Mini Crate. Yeah, I've heard a lot of good things about Frostgrave. And you can just use whatever minis you want. Quindy says, Quindy's our moderator, so she's not like an official Reaper person either, but she's also very well informed. Click on the preferred flag at the top left, and that will select your local currency and tell you which hub you will have your order shipped from. That's true. I always forget about the Discord because I'm 1,000 years old and I don't Discord very much. But that is a great place to go ask. I think there's probably even like a questions section where you can ask and get more information. And it just now, very lately, occurs to me that he has a high collar deep in here. I don't know if you can see that. Under his neck that I assume to be the same color as this overrobe type thing. So I'm just going to toss a few little highlights in there because of the kind of reddish orange green contrast. That will actually help with my goal of focusing attention in the focus area. Just want to get a little bit in there with my orange colors. And for all the new people, I sadly do not know the number of the show. I feel like it's 18 or 19. I don't know. So these shows are available on Twitch for like a few weeks, all the shows that air on the Reaper channel, but then they upload them onto their YouTube channel. So if you miss something or you want to go back and review something, you can go to YouTube, and sometime in November, but I think it only just got uploaded recently, I talked about how to steal a color scheme. So this color scheme that I'm painting on this elf is actually stolen from these pillows. So I talked about matching the colors and how I did that. So if you are someone who has trouble thinking of color schemes, stealing them from trained professionals includes people who do book covers and stuff like that. But it also includes people who do graphic design and packaging and flyers and those kinds of things. Those people are actually very well trained in color and how to use it to attract our attention and make things look cool or create certain moods. So I definitely suggest stealing from them. And that show is an example of how to do that. And then I just wanted to, I got distracted by holiday painting things, but I wanted to come back and work on him a little more. Let's see where we are time-wise. I will pause briefly to show some things. I'm just going to get the paints out of the way because otherwise I will almost guarantee to put something in the paint. So last week I was finishing up this Krampus, which I started the week before. I don't think I saw any of the Learn to Paint Krampus kits still in the Reaper store, but they do still have the holiday paint colors, which I don't think I'm just going to zoom back here and get my swatches. So these colors, not the ones here, but these colors are still available. So they're available as a big set, or they're available in triads that I don't necessarily know how they go together. I think like the blues are together. But they're still in the Reaper store. I checked before I started the stream. And if you want to see me paint these out so you can get a better idea of the colors, these two are metallics. There is a stream with that. These are very nice. I've been enjoying some of these colors. The cranberry red is pretty cool. I haven't had a chance to paint something cranberry red yet, but I want to have a chance to paint something cranberry red. So those are still there. The Krampus, you should be able to get the Krampus miniature even if the little kit isn't there. And then if you go back and watch the show, it covers it's only 4 paint colors plus black and white. So it's kind of a mini Learn to Paint kit live. There were some technical problems last week, but I think they were finished before. I think I got through the Krampus before the technology completely abused me. So this is the Gingerbread Knight, and he was like a promotional thing in December, but now he's available as a Bones USA miniature. You can just go in the Bones USA section and just grab this guy. Zambi says, graham cracker, now I'm hungry. But there's also chocolate and marshmallow, so I'm definitely hungry, right? Riker's Iron says, I do the same with color swatches at hardware stores. They often have group covers like a tri-color scheme, and they're always great for quick schemes. Yeah, if you look at, they'll have just the little single paint things, but they'll also have like dining room inspirations or royal colors or whatever, and they'll have room groupings where they're showing off this paint was the ceiling, this was the wall, this was the trim, but they'll have a couch with like some cushions and stuff. So it is, you can get some really nice color schemes from there, and they often even kind of tell you what mood it's going for, to give you some clues. And then they have little swatches of the paint in there so you can test your paints and match your closest one doing that. So Riker's Iron is correct. That is a great thing. He recommends Bear in particular, which is, I like that paint actually. Trueborn Atlas says, my next mini is going to come from the Home and Gardens magazine. You don't know. You could get a great thing. So if you wanted to get a bunch of these guys and convert them, or you didn't want to do it through the special promotion thing last month, he is now available for single purchase. Have fun with the chores, Riker's Iron. Good on you for doing it. Quinny says, everything that was uploadable to YouTube is now on YouTube, by the way, completely caught up. Last week's show went up yesterday evening. Lost Ted asked, how heavy is the figure? This one, so this is actually a Metal Master, but the actual one, where did I put him? This is the Bones USA one, and he's, so because it's a plastic, kind of plastic resin, I don't know exactly what this stuff is, but it's light, so it's durable, and it also makes it easy to convert. I noticed they had one on the show where they'd clippered him so it looked like someone had taken a bite out of him. Instead of putting the arm on, they made bite marks, and that was really cute. So it should be possible to do conversions and stuff like that on him as well, because it's the nice, easy cut, chopped plastic. And then this month's Bones USA figure is this very intense Knoll Barbarian that I did not go and look at the official name of. But so this is the one where if you buy $40 worth of stuff off reapermini.com, they'll just send you one of these. So you can go buy them if you want, but they'll also just send you one for buying other things. And then for comparison, I thought I would bring out the Knoll that I painted on a previous stream, just to give you a size compare, because I believe, yeah, these are both sculpted by Julie. And you can see this guy is kind of more of a barbarian in dress and attitude, instead of being a sneaky pirate like Hackle Black something or other. Blackfoot? Hackle Blackfoot. Julie won't know either, because we see these guys before they have names, and then we're supposed to try to remember the names, and that's just not my big area. When they play that game on Reaper Live, Name That Figure, that's not a game that I would ever get past the first round of. So he's pretty cool. So I thought I would show him off, because Ron had to send me something else, and he threw one of those in. And then just on an update of what I'm painting lately, I have the project I can't show you still, but I've done some more work on. So this one is pretty much finished. I'm leaving him on the handle in case once I do his base, I might want to like synchronize some staining or whatever on their aprons and the bases. So that's the main reason I haven't popped him off yet. But so they're supposed to be like brothers, but I'm going to paint him as a redhead in a slightly different color scheme. And I think they do both come in the same pack. So these are Bones USA 2, these are Chop and Grub, and they're already available. Julie thinks he's called a Ravager. Oh, I think you're right. I think he's one step past Barbarian. He's full Ravager. It's not resin, but they... So this is not the stuff that's produced in China. It's called Bones USA because it is Bones USA. So it's like... I don't think it's a spin caster exactly. There's a special machine that they use for this. And they have small molds where they'll have like 6 or 8 of these guys on the mold. And they use a particular material for it. So it has some give, but it's not as bendy as the... I don't think I have any... Oh, I have one. So this is classic Bones, the first kind of Bones that came out. And it's very bendy, and the weapons will... I mean, this guy's weapon isn't too bad. It's probably why I keep him nearby. But, oh, there's an unpainted one too. So this was the original Bones material. And then there's Bones Black, which does have more detail and isn't quite as bendy. And then Bones USA, it has even more detail. And while it still has some flex, which makes it more durable for gaming and transportation, it has a pretty nice edge. And I do file these where you can't. You can file this very carefully, and maybe I'll do a show where I show how I do that. But it's not as much of a pain to file these, and you can scrape these where you cannot scrape this white stuff at all. You can scrape Bones Black. So if you like to clean mold lines by scraping with a hobby knife, you probably don't love original Bones, but Bones Black and Bones USA are better for that. Trueborn Atlas enjoys that they have to be assembled now, fewer bendy swords. It'll depend on the piece, I guess. The Bones Black, I think, still come pre-assembled, but they shouldn't be too bendy. And you can fix a lot with a hairdryer. Bigger pieces is a whole other thing. But I don't think they can do big pieces in the Bones USA. I think there's, based on the size of the mold, there's definitely a size limit and there's a thickness limit. I was there for the, they did a kind of orientation for the sculptors to show them how it works. Because it's very important for them to know how the molding process works and how the molds look. Because they take all of that into consideration when they make a sculpt. It's not important for me to know that, but I like to just kind of tag along when the opportunity presents itself just to get information. And then I sold a bunch of those princesses to do stuff for you guys too, but I ended up not using her last week. So last week I was trying to paint darker colored skin, and I used this guy instead of the princess because he has... It's interesting, the small people, the gnomes and the halflings often have, if you look proportionally at the elf's face, these guys often have larger faces. So even though it seems counterintuitive that you would practice painting faces on smaller figures, they're often a little bigger than the, gaming scale humanoids. Does Reaper have any plans to release STL files? That does not seem to be anything that they're talking about doing on an ongoing basis or that they're super looking into. To my knowledge. They do get asked that question regularly, so I guess keep asking. Probably not this show, because I'd like to be the last person to know that probably. And if they do, they're going to have to print something out and send it to me, because I've been avoiding that whole thing. It's intriguing, and I get why people are excited about it, but I'm pretty low tech. So I don't think that is for me, and the whole thing, I have to set it up somewhere where there's no dust and the pets aren't going to get in it and the fumes are a problem. And my husband briefly looked at it and I'm like, the last thing we need is another hobby that's going to take up a bunch of space. Actually, speaking of the Dwarf King's Crypt, I didn't get to show that last week again, so I'm going to show that again real quick. So this is one of the new box sets, and as Kirst mentioned, something got left out of it. So if you see the size of this arch that was left in, you can imagine how big the thing that was left out was. But Ron was kind enough to send me one of these so I could show you guys. It comes in the box with the window. And then this part slides out and you can actually just fold it out and use it for a game if you want. Since it's gridded, you could just set up all of the terrain and stuff in there. for the encounter for your players. So this is the statue that is in the box, which is pretty big. I'll put this to the side so that the focus is not challenged, because the focus is always challenged. So if I get my little 4-scale back here as a representative of a normal human size Reaper figure, you can see that this is a pretty impressive statue. And I believe all of this set was sculpted by Tom Mason. And I shouldn't have zoomed in yet, because here's the giant arch that barely fits on screen with some nice dwarf runes. So you could just dry brush this up real quick, like I did on the stone a few weeks ago, and it would look good. So those are two of the terrain pieces. Then there's also the crypt, which has, as they often do on crypts, they have like a half statue of the deceased person on the top, and then here's his actual sad, decayed body in there. But don't feel too bad for him, because now he's a spooky ghost that will terrorize your players. This was in the 5th Kickstarter, and it's been released on the store now, so you have not missed out. I'm showing you this because it's just released, and you can easily get one if you like. This is Eternal Flame, which, if I recall correctly, wasn't supposed to be transparent, but it does give you the possibility to paint the flame, still called creepy and weird, and then you can paint the bottom part like normal stone, and it would be a cool effect. And then there's a whole bunch of dudes in here as well. Oh, wait, one more terrain piece. This is a very cool book. And this is big. I'm going to grab a dwarf. I'm trying to get it a live dwarf instead of a zombie dwarf, because zombies don't read a lot. And you can see that there's a lot of wisdom in there for this dwarf. Against my wallet's will, I will get it. Yeah, it's pretty cool. I really, if you look at these dwarves, I'm going to zoom in a little more now that we're down to the dwarves. They each have like a really neat, unique character and fun beards. I love the differences. Every one of them has like a different style of beard, which I thought was a really nice little touch. And this is very nicely defined texture. It would paint up equally well dry brushing, or if you want to get fancy. That is another alive guy. He's got triple beard. I mean, maybe he's the leader of the party. They all have names. I think it's on the back of the box, which I have now put elsewhere. He didn't want to go with braids. He tied off his beard instead. Is the flame base hollow? Yes. So I can't fit my whole finger in here. So it's hollow up until the bottom of this flat part. I think there's one more alive guy who went for the 2 braids, but part of his beard is unbraided. Beard fashion. And then I think the rest of these are the zombie protectors of the Dwarf King's Crypt. Well, he's an alive guy, I think. Yes. That's definitely not a alive guy. And that's definitely not a alive guy. So you've got a scary ghost and 3 zombies or undead terrors of your choice, depending on the level of your party. And some cool terrain. And some, if you like dwarves, those are some pretty fun dwarves. So I don't know if I will paint any of those. I guess it'll depend on what I decide to paint. Once I finish the dry brush test, maybe I'll grab some of that terrain and paint something up like for real, instead of just testing out how various brushes work for various things. So sadly, the videos that aren't up, because they got curses or dwarf whites according to the box. Yeah, I thought they were meant to be tougher than just, you know, low-level zombies. There may be fewer of them than there are of the dwarf party, but I don't think that's necessarily going to make it easy on them. Yeah, so I was saying the dry brush tests, alas, the test number 1 and test number 2, which were both on player character clothing type materials, they're Dwight's. Okay, yeah. I think they have to be Dwight's now because you said it. But the third dry brush test on the stone wall did make it and is posted on YouTube. And then I put pictures of the brushes and the results from dry brush test 1 are up on my blog now. If you scroll past the Wheel of Time crap and then past the New Year's thing, you will get to that. I have not updated the index lately. But yeah, I'm way I normally do it once a month. I'm way past time to do that. So hopefully I will do that soon. And then I'll probably get back to doing... I wanted to do a dry brush test on the wood texture from the... Bones 5 had a bunch of docks and things. So I wanted to do a dry brush test on those. And then Michael had suggested that maybe I should do scales. And I think that I have a bunch of... do I remember what they're called? No. They're like snake dudes. They were from Kickstarter 4. So, I mean, they're out now, of course. But I had used one for like an online class thing that is also on the Reaper channel for painting scales. So I have a bunch of those, and I kind of wanted to finish them up for like a color thing, because after the class someone said, well, what color would you paint the weapons? And I had an answer, but I thought it would be interesting actually to kind of test the answer and see what we think of what color theory tells us we should do. And there's probably always going to be more than one answer. Hey, Max Styles Painting, Happy New Year to you as well. All right, well, I did not turn that washing off, but that's life. So I just want to get a little bit of... pick out the arrow shafts a little. But while I'm thinking about it, actually, I want to go back to... I did have one picture for you. It's going to be sideways, but I'm going to show you anyway, just because it's fun. So there's that guy, but so imagine this in the other orientation. It snowed last night where I live, which doesn't happen a lot. It does happen, but it doesn't happen a lot. And as you can see, it's that pretty snow where it's like on top of the trees, but then it's sort of almost a perfect snow because it's on top of all the branches and it looks really pretty and everything, but it's not on the roads, so it's not causing any problems from that idea. But this is our cat who likes to go out at least once a day on his leash and go around the yard, and he can catch things this way and quite enjoys that. He's a very accomplished hunter. But this picture suggests more enthusiasm about the snow than actually existed, because it sounds like he walked down the front path. All these trees and things were touching him with the snow and his feet were getting wet, and he just walked right back to the door and was like, nope, I don't want any of this. We tried one time when it snowed a little more, even we tried putting him in the snow and he just ran straight to the front door. So as much as he enjoys outside, he's kind of a southern kitty. So he's our little southern kitty. Well, actually, the other cat's very much our southern kitty. She thinks she's going to die if the temperature is any lower than 70. And we've had like a really weird warm spell lately. So it's been warmer than that. I mean, I actually got out sandals. It was so warm I had to get my sandals out. And then it turned so cold last night, and she's just like, oh no, what's happening? We're all going to die. We've started keeping a heating pad on for her. So she hadn't been using that for the warm days, but I was like, okay, here's your heating pad back. Don't freak out. And that isn't even because she's old. She's always been that way. She's very southern kitty. Nope, it's not what I'm here for. I should be baking in the sun at all times. Whereas our other cat that was like super old and super skinny, but he was also super angry, so he never got cold. He was warmed by the burning fires of rage within. What do I want to paint next? I think I probably have to go back to this cloak, don't I? Oh, or the, I guess I need to paint the quiver some. Lost Ed says ginger cats are best. He's such a fun character. Well, there you go. There's a Reaper, Ask Reaper anything. You can put your questions about buying and other things, STLs and stuff in there, and they will answer those. I don't know. I think they do that on Reaperland. Do you know, Quindy? Where they answer the questions if they ask me anything. Quindy said we had a cold front come through yesterday that took us from 80 to 37 Fahrenheit. My cat did not leave the electric blanket all day. You got up to 80? Oh, wow. I thought we had it bad. We were in the mid-70s, I think. And then, so the storms a few weeks ago, a tree fell on a house, blah, blah. It happens a lot. This is insurance claim level tree, but, so the inspectors came out to check. So there's a problem with the roof, and that was very obvious, and roof inspectors came out, but then the tree also fell on our outside air condenser. So they needed to check that to see whether it would have to be replaced or not. And the guy came out, but we also have this like weird noise in our furnace sometimes. Happily it's not doing it right now, because you might even be able to hear it on screen at this point. I don't know. So we asked him to look into that. And then we cranked the heat up for him to be able to do that. And then he left, and it's just like, it's so hot. Like, I was already in sandals and a t-shirt and stuff. But I'm like, it's just getting hotter. And then I'm looking at the thermostat, and it actually is getting hotter. Like, it started at 75, and now it's up to 77. And I'm like, what is happening? And so we're flicking all the buttons and turning it off and doing this and doing that. And every time I go over to check on a heat vent, like, heat is coming out of it. And I'm like, we're going to die. Like, you have to call this guy. And he had left something on inside, like he rigged something so that the heat was just automatically on so he could look for this noise, and then he'd forgotten to take that part off. And it was like, oh my gosh, you need to take that off. So luckily, they were able to explain that over the phone. And we stopped boiling to death, you know, in late December. Because that was weird. I mean, we usually have green Christmas. And then the snow will come like in late January or February. It's not that we never get snow. This was a weird year. Ask Reaper anything is for the newsletter. Okay, so that for the newsletter, you have to be signed up to receive that via email. Which, do I know how you do that? Because I already did it. I bet it's on the webpage. And they no longer ask me because I already did it. Quinny said it was 80 to 82 for a few days. I stayed inside the whole time with the AC. Well, that was the funny thing, because, you know, a tree falls on your air conditioning in the winter, and you're like, okay, well, we got months to solve that problem, right? And then, you know, there's climate disruption, and no, you don't have months to solve that problem. Because it got knocked off where it's supposed to be, so like very strong people, the one guy couldn't do it on his own. Strong people have to come and do it as a team to put it back where it goes. Because I don't think I realized how heavy those things are, like actual tons. We looked up our unit and was like, oh, okay, well that explains why that one guy couldn't do that on his own. Buff as he was. Bottom right of the front page on reapermini.com is where you sign up for the newsletter. So since this is leather, I'm just doing kind of random brush strokes because texture is fine here. Texture is good. And then if I need to, I'll clean that up a little just because I'm losing, you know, I don't want to go too light in color. I think I switched my brush when I wasn't thinking about it. Back to the one that I need to replace. Alas. I keep putting it off because I'm trying to think if there's anything else I need to order from. Like, I'll probably go with Dick Blick, but I may order from Jerry's Artorama, depending on if one of them has something else that I want. I've definitely ordered brushes from Dick Blick in the past, and they have been cool about if something happened to the brush in transport, or it just wasn't great, they fix it. They've been weird about it. They've been great about it. So what I mean by weird is, so one time I ordered something. I don't even remember what brand of brush it was, but it must have been something I don't normally order. And they, you know how you get those little plastic things, these things on the brushes? This company apparently chose not to do that. So they sent their brushes to Dick Blick in some other way, and they didn't automatically have the plastic brush holders. So then when Dick Blick sent it to me, it didn't have the plastic brush holder, and it got smushed in transport. They're usually pretty good about like pinning them down in some way. They could tape them around the handles or do something else. So I contacted the customer support, and I'm like, fine, yeah, here's another one. And that one had the same problem. This is at the point I realized, like, okay, whoever makes these brushes must not be putting these things on, because I can't believe Dick Blick would make this mistake twice. So see how there's kind of, I don't know if you can see it on screen, but there's like a little section where there's darker and lighter. I'm just going to go ahead and turn that into a scratch. I'm going to emphasize it instead of trying to blend it away. Since this is supposed to be leather and he's supposed to be like an experienced adventurer type, I'll probably keep his cloak looking pretty fancy. I guess I could put a little bit of mud around the bottom at the end. You know, he's an elf. He's probably into looking pretty good and well maintained. Plus it could be a magic cloak. I'll just go ahead and make this even darker leather. Grey Mouser says, I see you painting the fat elf merchant. Is he fat? Well, he's got a lot of layers. I mean, cut the guy a break. He's got the scale thing, and he's probably got something under that so it doesn't chafe, and then he's got this like super thick velvet robe or something on top of that, and so you're right, he is overly clothed, but maybe he's trying to kind of cover up that he too had a very merry holiday and overindulged. Although I guess, you know, with the one upside of like COVID Christmas and stuff is that I have not been able to go completely nuts and get way thrown off my normal eating habits because there are fewer parties and whatnot. I mean, there were some parties, but we chose not to go. Grey Mouser said the less than elegant elf. Poor guy. No wonder he's lost. He's not lost. He ran away from home because all you people are like elf shaming him. So in case anyone wants to get one of these guys, this is who he is. Elanter the Lost Prince. By Bobby Jackson, and that is the number. Elf shaming. Ugh, it's a terrible thing. I'm just going to do the scratched up leathery thing a little bit here. And this is the sort of thing that I would actually spend too much time on, I think, when I first started to paint. Because as long as you can just tell that that's something else, that's all you really need to know here. It does not need to be amazingly detailed and wonderfully blended and whatnot. It just needs to be identifiable to the viewer as something that is not part of the hood here. I'm coming back in with my lining. I don't know if Michael is still here, but he would be the first one to tell you how important lining is as a tool to improve your painting. Sorry, I think it's just me. I know I totally see what you're saying, Grey Mouser. I don't have another elf here for comparison, but he would be friends with these guys no problem because they know where all the good buffets are. All right. Debating whether to actually paint this thing as a gem at some point, but I don't know if the colors I have would be convincingly gem-like. I think it's time to go back to the cloak, which may or may not be something I can do in the rest of the time. Probably not, but let's play around. So just to review where I was with the cloak, this is kind of the result I'm going for in the end. But this is how I started. I was just very roughly laying in the location of the highlights and shadows with wet blending. And this is kind of a middle stage, improving it. And then this is, I mean, depending on the use. If I were painting this for Rhonda, I'd probably give this just a smidge more attention. But for everyday use, I would be more than happy with that. And the colors I did on that were, so there's this ancient oak, but I think I mixed it a little with blue liner for the initial color on the cloak. So we'll have some mixes of this, and then this is the highlight color, the Medusa green, which is another Pathfinder color. So I did kind of go Pathfinding on these. There are some really neat colors in the Pathfinder set. I don't think it works as if you were only going to buy, like, well, they divided it in two, I think. But if you were going to buy, like, the Bones MSP or the Pathfinder, and you could only get one or the other, I would get the Bones. It has a more complete color selection. But if you're like me and your motto is kind of there's no such thing as enough paint, it has some really nice colors that do not duplicate other colors in the Reaper line. And as usual, I shook these before stream, so I'm not going nuts shaking them now. But you should shake your paint more than you see me do on screen. So now that I completed this swatch project, which I still have to swatch my replacement metallics from the ones that did not survive my paint maintenance lapse. I was looking at the way I have my shelves arranged and thinking about the fact that it doesn't really work. And I think this is going to be my next blog post is because I get that question, what's the best way to set up your paints? And I'll just spoiler alert the answer right now for you is whatever way works for you. So before we updated the floors and I got this new studio space, I had like 3 paint tiers, which are these like circular racks you can get. And they're actually pretty decent if you like having your paints on your desk. They're a great system. You spin, you know, it's like a stacked Lazy Susan, I guess, and you can spin them around and see what you got. And then I had like a tiered thing at the back. And I think I had the Pathfinder paints were in a case, and then my metallic paints were in a case. So there was this whole kind of stuff. My paint collection had grown to the point where there was kind of like stuff everywhere. But I knew pretty well where that stuff was. Like if I was looking for a particular paint, it wasn't too hard for me to say, okay, this is where the skin color paints are. I'll find it here. Or this is where this is. It'll be over here. Unless I put something away wrong, and then I was totally hosed. But when I got this new setup, I was like, oh, this will be great. And I have 8 racks. You can't see it. It'd be cool if they were in the background, but you have to watch Reaper Errant. They're in the background of that. So it's basically like most of a wall of paint. And it is great. And I set them up too complicated, I think. Like I overthought it. So it's like, it'll be... There was saturated green, and then there was like olive green, and then there were like natural greens, and then there were, you know, the blues were divided up into 2 sections, and the browns were like 4 or 5 sections. And it wasn't too bad for finding paint, but for remembering which section I thought a given paint belonged to for putting away, it was a terrible, terrible system. So what I decided to do instead, and I did most of this last night, but I didn't quite get finished, was I'm going to make fewer categories and just worry about the value. So they were sorted by value within their categories. So the, you know, it'd be like light to darker, what have you. And So now, like, the green is just their saturated green, and then there's less saturated green. And it's just from dark to light within that. There's no, like, 5 categories anymore. It's just 2 categories. We'll call it good. And a similar thing with red. I did, like, red reds and then more magenta reds as a separate category as well. And it's probably been since I worked on this guy last, since I was working on wet blending. And I always kind of have to remember how to do it. But basically, you just keep the paint wet. As long as it's nice and shiny, you can work it. And then if you start feeling it get sticky or anything, you got to back off and let that section start to dry. And when I rinse my brush off, I always get more paint on it before I come back to the figure, or I'm going to start lifting paint up. I think when I was originally painting this cloak, I said the light was coming from this direction. So that's why it's slightly, the lighter colors are slightly offset to the right. And then if I am done and I have to leave it, that's fine. It's not like that's the last, it has to be whatever way that was. I can come, once it's dry, I can come back over it and work it some more. Although by no means am I like the world's premier wet blender. Not even a little. But I like kind of establishing a big area like this with some wet blending, and then I'll come fine tune it like I was talking about with the orange on the front, where I got kind of the in-between colors and came and fixed it a little. I'm probably actually already overthinking this, really, given that fact. And I'll just try to fix that line a little. And already it's, you know, it's closer to this one now. So I will, actually I'm not going to fix that up yet. I'm going to start putting some paint on other parts as well. And these being smaller areas will probably be more straight layering. To me, the challenge of trying to wet blend in a small area is not worth the effort. Layering is more familiar, or more forgiving on a smaller surface anyway, so why not do that? Generally speaking, I think it's worth learning layering, whatever technique you want to use the most. It's like when I see people, watched people 2-brush blend, and I've watched people loaded brush blend, and I've watched people wet blend, and they all end up layering or doing a little bit of this, you know, working the edges or whatever you want to call it. So it's worth learning regardless, because for small areas, for refinement, if you don't like the stress of trying to get something done, you know, wet blending and other techniques, you have to finish doing something before the paint reaches a certain point. I mean, you can work over it again, like I just said, but it can be a little stressful where you're trying to, you know, rinse out the brush and get back in there to smooth out the blend in 2-brush blending, say. Although some people, of course, use 2 brushes and do it that way, but then you kind of have to juggle your brushes. And there's a speed element, basically, with all of these other things, is what I'm saying, that there is not with layering. Like, if I want to sit here and take 5 minutes to go like this, nothing else is messed up because I chose to do that. I often use these little quick strokes. Part of that is I'm trying to pull up with, like, decrease the amount of pressure that's being applied so that I'm creating the blend by applying less paint. But I could also just go and then clean up the edge a different way. And I would imagine this would be more of like a woolen cloth. It's not going to be super smooth and whatnot. I mean, I guess I did say this was probably velvet. He's a little fancy. I don't know. And I will come back and clean up that thing where I just pushed harder. But learning to control the pressure that you're applying the paint with is a very helpful tool to make any technique a little easier, I think. Or just improve the results you get, the speed you can do it with, stuff like that. The controlling the pressure helps a lot. And it's funny because when I've been studying more traditional painting, stuff like watercolor and oil paint and stuff like that. So I'll go to these classes or whatever, and I'll be completely incompetent in like 85% of the ways, but then stuff like, oh, you have to use a really delicate touch here. Yeah, cool. And the painting teacher will sometimes be like, "What? Why are you so good at some of this and so terrible at some of the rest of it?" It's like, well, this very specific skill set that I've worked on for 15 years, sometimes it applies. Like pushing value, that's a big problem with watercolor. People will paint like very pale stuff, and it is supposed to be a pale medium in some respects, but you've got to, just like with us, you've got to have the contrast, you've got to have the darks to make the lights shine and stuff like that. And I'll be like, okay, you want me to go contrast? I can do contrast. And they'll always be kind of like, how are you fine at this? And you suck at all this other stuff. It's like, well, I've been pushing contrast for a minute here, y'all. It's the never-ending struggle. So yeah, I'm liking how that hood's looking. Going with some of the lightest color. Think about whether I need to go lighter still. Yeah, this is meant to be one of the darker color areas on the figure, and I don't want to dilute that too much. I need to bring back a little of the darker parts. Then up here, I guess this is, okay, that's not a strap. Sometimes I have to check what things are from the front to make sure that I know what I'm painting. I will go back to work on this fold a little. Do it the cleaning up way instead of more wet blending. Just give you an example of how I would do that. So basically here, I'm just trying to, if I see rough lines that I don't like the look of, or I need to, I think the highlight color got a little lost in the wet blending. Try and bring some of that back in the main areas. So I could give this another pass of wet blending, but I'm going to do it this way instead. It can sometimes work better. I'm working very vertically here. It can sometimes work better if you work crosswise to the thing, like if you pull the highlight towards where you want it to be lighter. Essentially, this is lighter paint. In this case, I almost like the verticality. Like it almost has a weave texture look to it. If I'm not gonna refine this to like a super smooth blend. The streakiness can almost sort of work like a fabric texture to my mind. So I'm sticking with it. But in terms of if I was trying to make like a super smooth blend, I probably would be working a little more perpendicular to the transition line in an attempt to reduce its appearance. Yeah, I guess if I was going to come in with a piece of New Year's advice, it would be figure out what you like about painting. I do have a blog post about that, but I have no idea. Why do you paint miniatures? I think it's called that. But figure out what you like that's not about the end result. So that it's not, I love when I throw a table down, a figure down on the table and my players are terrified. Or I love, having the nicest painted warband at my hobby store or whatever. Those are all very much about the end result. And that's great. I mean, enjoying the end result is not a problem exactly. But it's a lot of what we're doing, between the idea of I want this cool thing and then that end result where you have that cool thing. There's a lot of this. There's a lot of just sitting in your chair doing stuff. So if you know what you like about that part and you make sure you include it and you use it as motivation to get you in the chair doing it, I think that helps a lot. It also helps when you get a result that you don't love. You can still say, well, okay, so this miniature didn't turn out how I wanted, how I saw it in my imagination or whatever, but I still got to enjoy doing this thing that I like doing. It was not wasted time. I did this thing. I did not approach miniature painting that way when I was learning to paint. When I started to learn to do like the watercolor and the oil painting and stuff like that, which as I just mentioned, I suck at abundantly. After a year or so of kind of approaching it the way I approach miniature painting, I sat down and thought about it that way. It's like, okay, I get something out of this, whether I hate the end result or not. Like, I like going off in the zone and not thinking about real life stuff for a while. I'm just thinking about how to get this color where I want it and how to pick out the colors and playing with what, sometimes it's like solving a puzzle, trying to paint something, draw something that looks like a face or a cat or whatever. I like all of that stuff. So even if I never make anything that looks good, I did something worth doing. And when I'm having moments where I get frustrated because of the sucking, I like to remind myself of that. Hey, Draught you're painting kobolds with us. Well, I would say that my elf's going to come beat up your kobolds, but it's been established that this is a fat merchant elf, so he's probably not going to do that. He's probably going to run away and hire some adventurers to come chase your kobolds. But I'm glad you could join us. So I don't know if that made sense, what I was saying about, keep in touch with what you like about this hobby apart from having a cool looking miniature at the end of it, and make sure you do some of that regularly and remind yourself that you do like something other than having a cool looking miniature, so it's not the end of the world if you finish a session and you don't feel like you have a cool looking miniature. For me, at least, that has been very helpful. With miniatures too. I mean, I'm not saying I never get frustrated because I'm like trying to learn something, and Draught is learning highlights. Well, I'm kind of working on highlights right now on this guy's cloak, which sadly is large, so it's taking a minute. Put a little more over here, maybe. Do some wet blending on that last fold, which if I was painting the light as if coming from here, it would not be super well lit over there, but it should still have some definition and whatnot, since this is not, source light type level lighting direction. dang it for being a bit colder, because if I'd been trying to do this wet blending when it was still 75 degrees and my furnace wasn't running all the time, it would work better. Now, I'm not going to break it out for this point, particularly since, you know, this cloak is pretty close to done. But if you live somewhere with a dry climate, or you are frustrated in winter when you're trying to do stuff like that, you can get this stuff, drying retarder, and it will help. And so this is Reaper's brand. You can get it at the art store as well if you don't can't get Reaper products easily. You'll pay more because you're buying a larger size if you buy the art store stuff. And I think Liquitex calls it slow dry, and I can't remember what the golden name for it is. They also often mix it into a lot of their mediums, so you sometimes kind of have to watch with the art store mediums. If you read the descriptions carefully, like on their websites, or usually on the bottle, though they're pretty good about giving a little description and extra information, you should be able to figure out from the description if it says anything about extends drying time or makes your paint workable longer, or any terms like that are kind of codes words for it has drying retarder in it, which if you want it is great, but if you don't, then you know to get a different kind of medium. And somewhere on the Reaper channel, so it was, I can't remember if it was, there was Reaper Virtual Expo and there was ReaperCon 2020. I think those are the only two kind of online convention things we had. I mean, there was an online component to ReaperCon last year as well, but there was also an in-person component. But anyway, on one of those, on the Reaper channel, YouTube channel, I should say, since it's no longer on the Twitch channel, I did a show called Additives, Mediums, and Pastes, Oh My. And I run you through what all of that weird stuff is. So Reaper's got their slate of weird stuff: brush on sealer, gloss sealer, drying retarder, wash medium. There's some other one, anti-shine additive, which actually not even the art people make this. You guys got to keep buying this so this never gets canceled. This is, Anne is the only person who has allowed us direct access to it. So lots of products use this. If you see something that's matte, so almost all miniature paints have something like this in it, because acrylic paints by nature are slightly too extremely glossy. But if you see like matte medium, matte sealer, it's this. It's got these little particles that break up the light. But Anne is the only person who's given it to us just straight. So if you have a paint that is a little shinier than you want it to be out of the bottle, you can just, I mean, you just use like a tiny little smidge of that stuff because it's very powerful. And if you use too much, it will create a frosting effect. In fact, you can use it to make frost. Maybe I should do that on a show soon, is do like snow and frost stuff. I don't know how it would look on camera though, since sometimes whites glare out, but I can give it a shot. So I guess let me know if you're interested in that. So show ideas I was thinking of for this month are how not to paint Christmas. So how to paint red and green that don't look like Christmas. We had that come up in a previous discussion, and because, you know, the color wheel will tell you those are great colors to paint, but then you're all like, but Christmas stole it all. How do we do it? So talk about that is one idea I have for this month. And then I was thinking about talking about the Shelf of Shame, because that seems like a January resolutions type of issue. Like, so that shelf you have that's full of half painted or not quite yet painted, or miniatures from a class or whatever thing. I was debating whether I should go through some of my Shelf of Shame miniatures with you on stream and talk through what the heck should I do with these things, because I definitely need to do that. And I bet I'm not the only person who needs to do that. And then maybe doing some snow, like different things you can use for snow. There's one at least that I would only be able to show. I wouldn't be able to, or like I wouldn't be able to do it on stream, because there's one type of snow stuff that you need to wear a mask for, and you need to wear like a good mask. So I would sound like Darth Vader. But I can show you a finished figure that has that type of snow on it and describe how you do it. And that one is actually the most photogenic snow, which is the reason I went ahead and masked up and made that piece. But there's a couple other things that I kind of do for sort of everyday snow use. And some things that are more gaming sturdy than not. Dwarf Slayer said, I used to do a base coat wash and done, so I'm trying to learn to make my minis pop a little more. I just practiced on the Reaper Frost Giants, but these kobolds are way smaller. That is true. So some things will be easier on the bigger miniature, but then on the small miniatures, you don't have to worry about trying to make the blending look smooth as much. You can kind of just dot on your lighter and lighter colors, and sometimes it's easier. But yeah, the kobolds are pretty tiny, so I can understand where you're finding those challenging. Max Styles painting could be a storage unit of shame for me. Well, see, my husband once said to me that collecting miniatures and painting miniatures can be two separate hobbies. So I don't feel bad about the boxes and boxes of unpainted miniatures in the basement. Those are just part of my collection. But then the half-painted things or the prepped things that I have like a little, well, not an entirely little plastic box full of, plus my actual shelf at this point, that's where the shame comes in. But then we reframe it, because some people are saying it's not your shelf of shame, it's your shelf of opportunity. So that's another way to look at it too. Is it in our mind, or in our boxes, or in our storage units? Nomad Zeke, I think it's quaint that some painters' shame can fit on a shelf. I have a box, if a room qualifies as a box. Well, I hope those aren't all half-painted minis, because I'm mostly talking about like half-painted minis or prepped things, or like projects you started, or things like that. Just having miniatures, that's just having miniatures. There's no shame in that. You'd die if you didn't have a big pile of miniatures. Well, I'll die if we paint our last mini, so that's just life insurance. Quantum Reveries, thanks. I have an airbrush medium I sometimes use to thin my paint, but it's too glossy. I should try the anti-shine additive as an experiment. I would probably, for thinning your paints, yes. I would not put that stuff through an airbrush because it is particles, so it might be more likely to clog your brush. But your airbrush medium probably also has that drying retarder stuff in it. Every airbrush medium I've tried seems like it slows down the drying of the paint because it helps your airbrush not clog so easily. But it can work really well for thinning metallics, having the stuff that's glossy. So then you use that on your metallics, but add a little bit of that anti-shine stuff when you're thinning out matte paints. Max Styles painting. People with a shelf of shame are not trying. They need to buy more. Joss Slayer says, my sister got a white ceremony sand for her wedding. It's super fine and sparkles and looks like perfect snow. When I put them on the frost giant base, the wash bled through a little and made it look like muddy snow. Oh, that sounds really neat. I don't think I have tried super fine sand. I have kind of a paste is my favorite one. And then I didn't like the Woodland Scenic stuff as much, but it sounds like you guys might enjoy a snow one. So maybe I'll try to collect all my various snow options and do a snow base. We could put him on a snow base, I guess. I could just give him a wider base, but I'll probably just get blank bases and goof around on them. And then maybe just do the final thing on a miniature. I think the thing that I like is fairly easy to acquire. I actually got it at a local hobby store. I mean like the Joann's type hobby store. But I'm pretty sure I couldn't find it there when I wanted a second container of it, and I got it off Amazon, so I don't think it's hard to find. I don't know that I've ever actually done the just straight up baking soda snow, but I feel confident that enough people on YouTube have that if someone ends up being unhappy that I didn't cover that they'll be able to find sources of information on that one. My 2022 goal is to first clear my 12x12 shadow box of half-finished miniatures, a literal shelf of shame, says Quantum Reveries. That's the kind of thing that I'm looking at, is this stuff that I feel bad about because I haven't done anything with yet. Do I need to feel bad? Do I need to just abandon those projects? I'm thinking about talking that out with you guys. J Slugger 68. I just bought some granulated white wax. Wow. I don't think I've heard of that. That's very intriguing. Have you seen that recommended for snow, or it's something that you saw and you're like, I bet this would work with snow? Drosslayer is noticing with the kobolds, I just need to edge highlight and it looks awesome. Yeah, that is the advantage of painting very small things. Speaking of, so my husband got this board game, I want to say it's called Destinies. And for some reason, even though I never offer to paint our board games, I thought I would offer to paint this one. Because this is the guys. I mean, they're this big. So I thought, well, if I just, you could probably just mix and slap on colors and it wouldn't be too bad to paint some of these guys. But I'm just going to start with the first 3, and then if I totally hate it, then I'm done. There are some monsters and stuff that are bigger than that, which I have not offered to paint. But I thought I might try to paint the tiny little guys. I don't know that I could do that on stream, because I'm pretty sure I'm going to have to be like this to paint them. But we'll see. I mean, I'm not going to give them eyes or whatever. They are going to be gaming figures. Just give them some color identification, because they're so small. Imagine these guys on the game board. But if this one's a little more red, and this one's a little more green, and this one's a little more blue, it's going to be easier to tell who's who and where they're going. Speaking of edge highlights, do you want to get a little bit of that going? I think I'm almost there with this cloak. Let's see. J Slugger has not seen anyone use it, but it looks like the right size and may glue nicely. I might also try a little heat gun for fun. That could be interesting. Everyone wants Drosser to play their Blood Rage miniatures, but never get around to it. Yeah, I painted one game of figures for my husband, and actually I used substitute figures because I didn't like the figures that came in the box, but it was just 5 guys. And then and that kind of worked out, because in the end we didn't love that game, so we sold it. But since those weren't the guys that came in the box, I got to keep my painted miniatures. Actually, I tell a lie. I painted Mice and Mystics, not the expansions, but the base Mice and Mystics. And we played it a little, but we really need to get back to that, because that is the only board game that I painted all the miniatures for, because they're just adorable. Well, actually, there's a spider and a centipede, and they are not adorable. Especially, I often like to look up real life things when I'm painting something like that. And I looked up centipedes for about 5 minutes, and I'm like, nope, no, I'm just gonna use my imagination. I do not need to know this much about centipedes. I did not look up spiders, because I just tried to paint that spider as quickly as possible. Let's just say that. That is not where I focused my attention. But interestingly, there's cockroaches in there too. I think those are your low level guys, because you're little mice, right? Well, you're people who've been transformed into little mice, more accurately, I think. So cockroaches are your easy level guys, although they can come in number, and then they're less easy. And if you get kind of the right lighting on them, they have this sort of golden glow that's kind of neat. So I enjoyed painting those. That was when I first got my first airbrush. I used those for practice. So I think I'm just going to call that good on the cloak. I mean, this is the kind of area that if I were painting this for Ron, I would go on for some time. But I don't think you want to watch that level. Casmania is curious what the game was. I'm trying to remember. So it's like a space game. It's not Galaxy Trucker. You're like a team of people, and you're trying to do stuff on the ship. So like if you're the engineer, you might have to do one thing, and if you're the captain, you have to do something else. I don't think I ever actually played it, and like other people were playing it, is why I don't remember. So it's like a cooperative game where you're trying to, the spaceship is having challenges, and you're trying to do things. Yeah, let me just go on mute a second, and maybe my husband will remember. He did remember it. Space alert. And Queenie is telling me it's time. So since I am pretty much finished the cloak, that's a good stopping point. I'll probably... I don't know. I kind of do want to finish this guy. So if you guys don't hate the idea, maybe I'll just keep going on him next week. Or I could take a break and do snow and then come back to him next week. But I do also, I figure it's worth doing the how to paint red and green without painting Christmas. I have some examples of that. Here. The thing about these round things is they're just going to roll away. So prop them up. I'm sure that Quinny will find you a raid. And it seems like we have some new people, so I will just take a minute and mention some of the other cool stuff you can enjoy here on the Reaper channel. So Monday through Fridays, starting at 11:30 a.m. Reaper time, which is Texas, so that's Central Time. Ann Forrester, who is the person who created all the Reaper paint lines and is very knowledgeable about the Reaper paints, she has a show every day, Monday to Friday, starting at 11:30. I'm on Monday afternoons at 2 p.m. Reaper time. Tuesday is the Crow's Nest. I don't know if Clever Crow is still with us, but he's one of the two hosts of that show. The sculptor Jason Weavy is the other host, and they usually have industry guests on, and we get to have a lot of insights into Space Alert, Quantum Reveries. Although Space Cadets sounds fun too. So that and I don't know if he knows who the guest is, but I don't know if I'm authorized to say. So I'm just going to leave you in suspense, but come watch Crow's Nest tomorrow at 5 p.m. Then Wednesday is Miniatures Done with Luca, which I think now starts at 1 p.m. Luca's an Italian painter, so it's a nice way to get a look into, the Italian style of painting, or the European style of painting is a little different. So it's cool that Reaper has a show. Nomad Zeke says, wasn't the Crow's Nest guest announced earlier? Am I losing your mind? I don't know, because I know it was announced to me, but I don't recall seeing a public announcement, so I don't know that. Oh, there you go. Ann told you this morning that it is Ann. So if you'd like to meet Ann Forrester outside of her show, that would be a great opportunity. And you can ask her more questions about the show if you want. Thursdays is the Crafty Creative with Josh Foreman. So if you asked him how to make snow, I bet he'd know like 20 ways instead of like the 4 ways that I know. He's very creative. He does, maquettes and scenery and stuff like that. Reaper Live is at 6 p.m. That's a show where you can go win stuff, but also find out what's coming out next and what the people at the Reaper Factory have been up to. Friday is Reaper Land at 3 p.m. And that's the community show with John and Dave. And then every other week, and this is one of the weeks, is Reaper Errant, which is myself and Michael and some of the other Reaper artists play a D&D game that is hosted by Nightheart Gaming. And they have like amazing tables, and all the miniatures are painted, and there's music, and sometimes there's special effects. And Frank is just like a genius at being able to give you a satisfying narrative arc within the allotted time period, but we also have a continuing story. So we have a lot of fun, and we have a lot of fun with you guys coming to watch us too. I don't know why you want to come and watch us, but we enjoy that you do. So I'm gonna let Quinny find us a raid now, and thank you all for coming and try out that. Here's what I have this now, so I can just press buttons. As soon as I figure out how to do it, and I press the right button. Bye, everybody. Thanks for coming.